Welcome, everyone. Thrilled to be able to have you here. Appreciate you joining us this afternoon and for a special treat. We've got two wonderful folks who are going to join us and give some presentations today. Wait just a few more minutes to let a few more people join us. I know we have some Deborah Kerr fans in the audience. Of course, I'm one of those. We're thrilled to be able to have you, Deborah, and Kent. I appreciate you joining us and being
so glad to be here, and glad to be here with Kent, who knows about this stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
So with that, Deborah, I do want to do a quick little intro bio. She told me not to read it, but I do want to do a little bit for folks so they got a little bit of background on Deborah if you don't already have it, and you may, is right. So Deborah Kerr joined the faculty, one of the, in some sense, almost founding faculty at the Bush School back in '99. So she told me not to say that, but I went ahead and did it anyway. Quick recognition, the fact that we're both using the same cup. So just to be clear on that, I don't want anybody to miss that.
No planning.
Okay, so then she teaches graduate courses in public theory, organizational performance, and management. Her teaching has been recognized by the university, a Distinguished Achievement Award, and the Silver Star, which is the Bush School Award, on multiple occasions, 2009, 14, 15, 18. So you guys are in for a real treat. She's been an executive in private, public, and nonprofit organizations. Her academic and practice expertise includes performance management, measures, talent management, and manager of executive performance. She served on the board of the Central Texas Food Bank and currently serves on the board of Family Elder Care, which is where Kent's at. While an executive at the Texas State Auditors, she led the development of one of the nation's first public sector balanced scorecard performance score measures in 2004. The State Auditor's Office had a measurement system, was recognized as one of the world's best. So that's one of the key pieces. And if you ever get a chance to get some of Deborah Kerr's performance management stuff, worked in a variety of organizations. She's been published in a number of different places. She holds a degree from St. Mary's College, Notre Dame, Columbia University in New York, and also the University of Texas in Austin. So Deborah, I appreciate it. And I'll do a quick intro for Kent as well. Kent's currently the CEO of Family Elder Care, and he comes from Abilene, where he was one of the regional vice presidents for the Sears Methodist Retirement System. Kent and his wife, Christine, have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Kent received his bachelor's degree in healthcare business from Columbia Southern and a master's degree from healthcare administration from the University of Mary Hardin Baylor. Kent began his career as a senior services at the Regis St. Elizabeth Centers in Waco. As the director of food service, Ken went on to get his nursing facilities administrative license and went to work as vice president of long-term care services at Providence Park in Waco, and then joined the Sears Methodist Retirement System. Ken's been involved in senior care for over 30 years and has been a consultant for many communities, projects including new facility construction, owner-manager transition, and program design. Ken's currently a board member leading Age Texas, serves on the board of the Lions Garden, a low-income senior community, and has served as advisor to long-term care at the McKellen Community College. Kent, pleasure to be able to have you here with us, and like I say, this should be a wonderful session. With that, Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go on ahead and do the session. Same thing, folks. Feel free to introduce yourself on the chat box. Feel free to use that as a clarification or questions. But Kenny and staff from the center will be monitoring that and try and filter those in for folks so that we can get some questions in, because the discussion's some of the best part. And Deborah, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Will, and thanks, Kent, for joining us. Hello, everybody. The virus, the pandemic, the COVID-19 is really unprecedented because of 3 disease factors. 1, high level of contagion, that's great. Significant fatality rate, and the absence of any vaccines. And if that isn't stressful enough, right now, we also have powerful and important civic actions focusing on racial justice that are happening around the world. And so bottom line, there's nothing. There's no training, there's no disaster planning, there's no communication strategy, and there's no resilience effort that could prepare people for this reality in this moment. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some surveys on employee engagement that have happened in the last 6 weeks. Over the last 12 weeks, one survey found that US employees and managers are about 20% less likely than they were in May. So we're talking about a very short time frame. They are 20% less likely to feel prepared to do their job. They're 20% less likely to believe that their employer has communicated a clear plan in terms of response to COVID-19. They are 20% less likely to feel that their immediate supervisor is keeping them informed about what's going on in the organization, and they're 20% less sure that their organization cares about their overall well-being. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We know that work and family intersections right now are particularly demanding, especially for families with children. At the same time, we have to remember that single and childless workers are not immune to the negative consequences of this situation. And in fact, some research shows that they may be at most risk of feeling loneliness, a lack of purpose, and other associated negative effects. Understanding this notion of employee attitudes and engagement can really help improve decision-making and enhance an employee's connection to the job. We first saw research on this in the 1930s, so we're closing in on 100 years. And the research has shown that favorable job attitudes are correlated positively with performance at the individual level and at the business unit level. So we've got information that says employee engagement is important overall, and especially important now. Okay, let's see, how do I? Okay, here's an overview of an engaged employee. If people are highly engaged, they are identifying personally with the job, and they have motivation by the work itself and the mission of the organization. When an employee is engaged, they focus their energy and action to make high contributions to their job, and they also find ways to actively allocate their personal resources toward the tasks. And those resources are intellectual, they are emotional, and they are physical. So when we look at what's happening right now, whoops, we don't want to go to the pandemics yet. We have these two global concurrent events that for managers and leaders are important to pay attention to right now and in an ongoing way. I took a look at history of similar situations. And although COVID-19, we are sure has fundamentally changed in some ways our notion of work, where we work, how we work, and the demands of our job, it's not the first time that we've had pandemic situations. I've got 4 here, there are others. Historians suggest that after the Black Plague wound down, there were some changes in the laws and attitudes about labor, particularly, and I found this interesting, laws were created that were meant to prevent businesses from taking advantage of the plague to make more money. Oh, wait, that's 1350. Similar to what we're seeing now, we have the 1918 flu pandemic. After the end of that pandemic, we saw changes like employer-sponsored healthcare being implemented. And we know that in 2003, we had the SARS epidemic, and that had demonstrable effects on health and well-being of essential workers. And we saw that in systems relevant employment. And we know that years after the pandemic, workers were still struggling with symptoms of PTSD, depression, substance abuse and dependency, as well as higher risk for suicide. So here we are in 2020. We don't really know what the outcome is going to be, but we're pretty sure that there's going to be shifts in, again, how we work, where we work, and the structure of organizations. I couldn't just talk about the pandemic because we are also in a time of civil change. And interestingly enough, around the time of the Black Plague, there was also around the 14th century until about the beginning of the 16th century, there were popular revolts all over medieval Europe. There were civil wars between nobles, and this is when the War of the Roses happened. And France alone had 9 different internal conflicts going on. In 1992, we had the Los Angeles riots, and research has shown that almost 300,000 people were affected by those and suffered the same kind of responses to the stress that we saw from the pandemics. In 2014, we had Ferguson, Missouri. In 2015, we had Baltimore. Same results. Those touched by the unrest, higher levels of PTSD, symptoms of major depression, and higher risk of suicide, and all of that to say that mental health outcomes are important to track following environments like we're in right now with the pandemic and the social actions that are taking place. So that's the backdrop. And here's a little bit about engagement itself. What we know is that employees simply expect, particularly in the nonprofit world, that they will see social impact as a result of their work. And they also express that they expect their organizations to demonstrate progressive management practices. What we know further is that when we're building engaged employees, 2 antecedents or 2 drivers come up over and over and over again. The values of the organization and the service, as well as the job characteristics, what people are expected to do. Starting there, as the effects on employees are seen from focusing on values, matching and being clear on job characteristics, matching those with the individual, the results that we see are increased job satisfaction, which has a positive impact across the organization. We have higher commitment to the organization, and that translates into lower intention to quit. And we also see more individual employee citizenship behavior, helping others in the organization. Well, that's not right. Let me see. So we've got value congruence. We need to pay attention as leaders to the goals of the organization, the roles and responsibilities of those in the organization. And recognizing that is positive not only for the health of employees and the engagement they feel in their work, but also affects the bottom line in a positive way. So here are a few of the actions that people can take. We know that most leaders want to help and support their employees, but leaders are mistaken if they assume that employees are well-informed and continue to be well-informed and equipped just because time has passed. The passage of time does not reduce the need for information. And it seems from very recent research that the employees responding to the surveys are feeling less well-informed and less well-equipped to do their job. They don't feel prepared to do their job, and they're becoming unsure of their alignment with the organization. So to counter that, what you can do is look at these three areas of organizational performance: values, health, and performance of the organizations. The leader, now here I'm talking just about leaders and what they individually need to do. You need to, as a leader, develop the ability to reflect on your own experience in this moment. What is it that you are experiencing? Being in touch with that, identifying that, naming that, can increase your success in supporting employee engagement. In terms of health, we're talking not only physical health, but we're talking mental and emotional health. The idea of the leader reflecting on and naming their own emotions, again, self-recognition. Leaders need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves because their employees are going to be looking to them for guidance. And an important part of this is checking boundaries at work. With the current situation, with many people working from home, what we see happening is that employees can have loose boundaries, permeable boundaries, and they may not stop working to recharge. In terms of performance, of personal performance of the leader, the main focus right now, and I think Kent's going to talk about this, is focusing on managing change in your organization, recognizing it, talking about it, and approaching it from the leader's vantage point. You also want to check your own work goals. How are you doing at identifying the work goals that are important right now in this unique time? And then the other main factor is identifying organizational risks, so that as a leader, you are focused on the right stuff, that which is going to make your organization more successful and your employees more successful. So that's what leaders do, or that is helpful for leaders to do individually. Now, the idea of employee engagement at the same time, we know that the same three factors are important. We're going to move the focus to now employees. For leaders, it's critical to focus particularly on managers here. When we're talking about employees, the more the leaders of the organization can support managers in their ability to be successful, the better outcomes the organization is going to have. So what this looks like is to have open and transparent conversations based on the most up-to-date knowledge that you have. It is important to consistently give the same message to the whole team of managers. It is important to spend time listening to those managers. Don't rely on email, for example, as the primary method or only method of communication. You want to stay in touch with employees in a way that enables you to share information and listen at the same time. So here are some actions that relate to values. The idea of reinforcing the purpose and the mission of the organization is really important. You want to keep that message consistent, provide ongoing reminders about the values of the organization and what you stand for, and make sure that managers are also providing a consistent message over time. In terms of health, you saw some of the outcomes from past health crises and social crises. And what we know is that there are measurable effects. So touching base with employees regularly, talking with them openly and compassionately in terms of sharing how you're handling the stress and how you are interested in supporting their ability to manage the stress. One thing for leaders and managers to remember is it would be great to stay as flexible as you can. In terms of support and setting boundaries, it's the same as with the managers. Where's your off switch? How does that work? The idea of communicating regularly about health is important too. If you have an employee assistance program, make sure that people know about that. If you have regular meetings, regular check-in meetings, that can be really helpful to your employees. In terms of performance, it's important to stay flexible here too. Help managers review the work goals and roles and responsibilities and expectations. You know, are they the same now as they were 12 weeks ago? Should they be the same now as they were 12 weeks ago? To the extent you can, provide employees with what they need to be productive, whether that's technology support, communication support, hardware, software, whatever it is that you can provide employees so that they can continue to be productive. And that notion of being as flexible as possible in this situation vis-a-vis performance. You really got to do some thinking about what are our goals now and what should our goals be now. And now, it's a quick overview, and I'm going to turn it over to Kent, who will spend some time talking about family elder care and how he has led the response in the organization to providing services to a population that has high needs and that is not necessarily technology savvy. And the business is based on face-to-face communication in so many ways. So Kent, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Thank you again for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Deborah, and thank you, the group, for inviting us. This is not our normal forte. We're into serving, and it was interesting to. I've seen the slides prior to this, but to hear Deborah speak on these subjects, I'm sitting here taking notes for myself to follow up on some of that. So please if there's any questions that you have at the end, love to answer them. Let me tell you just a little bit about Family Elder Care. I'll do it quickly. We provide services to more than 12,000 seniors, adults with disabilities, at-risk veterans, and families on a given year. Several of those programs that we do that through are through a guardianship program, a housing and financial stability program, a counseling program that provide to homebound seniors, personal assistant services managed through HHSC, housing community services, helping people that are in low-income housing access benefits that they don't even know that they're qualified for, even to the point of Social Security. A summer fan drive, which is huge for us, providing circulating air in Austin. We send out typically 7,000 to 8,000 fans every year.
And that fan drive is going on right now, right, Kent?
Actually, yes, it is. It starts May 1st and usually ends around September.
Yeah.
Till the heat is a little dissipated. And then a telephone program. It's a Healthy Connections program, just staying in touch and connecting with seniors that are homebound and are not able to have that social connectedness. And, you know, there is the social isolation. So add COVID to that, and you've got a bigger problem. That they were getting out once or twice. Now they're not able to get out, mainly for health concerns. And so we're about, you know, our vision is that all Texans thrive with dignity and purpose in supportive communities and are financially secure, even to the point that I would say 80% of our clients, their annual income is, or not annual, their monthly income is about $780. And so we do that through some 2 or 3 strategies: improve our operational excellence, which is continual, so align programs to increase client and community value, and then invest in community awareness, engagement, and most importantly, relationship building. And that's kind of where we'll have to pivot because of the issues at hand today, especially COVID. Been around for 38 years. We've got a great staff. And so an area that we practice a lot is trying to be intentional in everything that we do. And so to us, how we define being intentional is the difference between who we are and who we want to be and what we want to do. And what we have to do to get where we want is defined by the work we're willing to do. So to kind of think through that, it really comes down to the work that we're willing to do for our community. Back in early March, I'm going to say March 15th, because it was our Ides of March. We were notified through a letter, an email. I received it on Sunday night. And anytime you get an email from the city on Sunday night or the weekend, you typically read those. And it said something to the effect that, hey, you need to shut your doors, and since you serve the elderly, by the way, we need to start doing temperature checks and get all this personal protective equipment, and figure out how to do your business. That was Sunday night, and Monday comes pretty quick. And so I immediately went online and ordered personal protective equipment. I've yet to get it, but I ordered it in March. We were deemed an essential business, but apparently not essential enough to get some of this equipment. To this day, though, the reaction from the city and the other community has been overwhelmingly in support. They've given us masks, they've given us equipment, they provided that to us. And so I want to make sure that that's noted as well. So in all this, on the 15th of March, what does an older adult, person-centered, relationship-building organization do to continue to serve our clients? Some of the most vulnerable in the city. So not only do we serve people that are older adults in their homes, but we also, in Austin, Texas today, there's roughly 2,000 people over 60 living on the streets. That's a fact. And so how do we serve that group as well without being person-centered, touching, like Deborah said, and visiting with them in person? So there we are with change management in a hurry. And so some of the decisions that, I get to make or am forced to make, there's always time, there's always a conversation. We can bounce things off one another. But in this case, we had to act quick and then kind of ease back into a situation that you could gain reinforcements from your management team. Family Elder Care is about 100 employees. I would say 80% of those are social workers in a care management, case management role. They all are human behavior associated degrees, training and or experience. These people are passionate folk. They know what they do it for a purpose. And so that one slide that Deborah put up about are they engaged, oh my gosh, that's the only reason they apply here, because the mission and their engagement in the social issues, whether it's social justice or social financial or social, it's an issue to them. That's where their heart lies. And so, at the end of the day, they are emotionally attached, motivated by the work. We put out a survey every year, and that is the highest mark that we get. 95 to 98% of our staff are motivated by our mission and the work that they do. They are contributors at a very high level, very dedicated group, very little turnover in our organization. And talking about allocating personal resources, I heard Deborah's definition, but it even goes beyond that. They risk their family, they risk their finances, buying product or stuff, just because it's at that moment that client may need that thing. And so it's a matter of just their heart. We're a little more of a servant leadership organization. And so you put those two words together, yes, we are leaders, but we do it from a servant's heart. And it's amazing how that can become, the lines are pretty blurry in how you take care of yourself and how you take care of others as well. So due to the COVID-19, and we'll kind of shift into that area, some of the things that we had to adjust, some of those changes that we had to adjust to. We had to change to see how we saw clients from day one. There's so much information coming out, and if you remember, you can go back, it seems like a year ago, but go back to late March, early April, and all the different CDC guidelines, and in our case, Austin Public Health, Travis County, the mayor, add all those together, and it was not daily, it was hourly updates. And just trying to track that. I'm going to remind you that we're a pretty lean organization because we want, even though we have 80 employees, 90 employees, we are here to serve clients, not be heavy on the administrative side. And so we don't have research people. I rely on Dr. Kerr for that. I thought we did data until I met Dr. Kerr. She brought the whole new data thing to us, and I really appreciate that. We're using her services quite a bit. But we had to see how we were seeing equipment, how we see clients. Never before did we have to even think about personal protective equipment. We were using universal precautions. We'd have a glove for a personal care attendants, and you didn't need a mask because everybody was, that's just how we did business. Today, you have to do a 7-question test. You got to do a temperature check. You got to have gloves, a face mask, a gown. And so just that presentation of us is that person-centered care, is that servant leadership. So the questions, even to the staff coming to me, are like, and I don't even feel like I'm doing that care, even though the outcome is the same. We'll talk about outcomes in just a second. So just trying to find the equipment again, we had great community support for that. Deborah alluded that we are not a technology company, we're a service organization. And that is, I grinned and I laughed underneath my breath. And we had an organization that everybody had a desktop computer. On Sunday, we were told to go remote. Guess what? They took their desktop computers home because that's the only way they could communicate. Not all of our staff have laptops and technology and iPhones. And so, we're not the highest paid segment of service delivery people. And so they rely on the work place environment to provide them that equipment. So we immediately started buying laptops for everyone. Through the graciousness of several family foundations, we were able to do that. They jumped on the board real quick, and just accessing that was huge for us. The technology seemed to work, but then we had to worry about how do you access the internal functions of the building, the server, and so we had to work through that. And then working with our collaborative partners. We probably have 14, 15 very close collaborative partners that we do work. We all stay in our lane. We all do a specific service. If we want food, we call Meals on Wheels. If they want case management or guardianship, they call Family Elder Care. So that kind of stuff doesn't stop. What we found out though was that the needs changed from our clients' need, or the client needs changed. And so instead of, hey, I need to see if I can get my SNAP benefit card, they needed food today. And so now we became into the food acquisition business, working with Central Texas Food Bank, working with Meals on Wheels. How can we get the food out to them? Working with the city, and again, the community support was overwhelming. McDonald's brought us hamburgers to deliver to our clients. Simple stuff like that. It's just a matter of they cannot leave their apartment to get out anymore. They didn't have that support. So we shifted in less than days, we shifted our focus onto the immediate needs. And you would think what we were providing, basic needs, housing, food, and electricity or utilities, was basic enough. But they redefined the basic for us, our clients. And so we were able to adjust. We had to also seek additional funding. The best news is that most of our funding comes from either government contracts and or foundations. And the foundations immediately said, use your funding to meet the COVID-19 issues. And so that was a welcome that we didn't, we don't have the finances for that. In fact, I tell our board every year, my goal is to get to a black zero. We've spent enough, we've spent every dime we made, and we've served as many people as we can get. And so, and they're excited if we can do that. So it's been good. We sought out the resources that were available to us through the government, the Paycheck Protection Program. We were lucky enough to get one of the first in the first group and get funded. That allowed us to keep every staff member on payroll. It's huge for this group. And so nobody missed a paycheck, nobody missed a benefit because of what we were able to access and those decisions to get to that. Being guided by our supporters, long-time bank relationships, long-time foundation relationships. So I can't emphasize enough the relationship building, which was all done in person. And so our fear is that, through lasting effects of this, and Deborah alluded to this, is where does that leave us if this lasts months longer or years longer? How do we have to come back and rebuild some of those relationships that we've built over the phone now, but how do we make them real, that you and I can actually go out and shake somebody's hand? I'm an old West Texan boy. I mean, it's by the word and by the hand. And so still doing that today. Our staff expectations, it's funny that that Deborah said data, we are, because of the metrics and because of how the funding comes, we are so metrics and output centered from a funding standard. We do the work and then we have to report it on metrics, right, or outputs. It was interesting. Immediately the funder said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about your outcomes. Meet the needs of the clients. Our staff said, well, heck, we're going to still meet the needs of the clients, but we're going to still meet the numbers. So we didn't have to change that way. And that kind of goes back to the staff that we had involved at that time, or we still have today. It's just that heart, that service model as well. So we moved from a model of inputs and outputs from a structured environment. You got to understand, we were all coming to an office building. We were packed like sardines in this building, trying to fit more people in. We're always expanding. It seems like the need will never go away. I can tell you that. We have waiting lists in every program. But we had to begin focusing on the how and not the what. How are we going to get it done? Not what are we going to get done? And so, you know, funders releases of the obligations, as I've said, staff remain committed. We had to begin providing the resources or the tools or the equipment for the staff to meet those needs. And initially, everybody wanted to go, oh boy, I get to work from home. Because that was not an option prior to March 15th. In fact, we probably had one person that worked 1 day a week out of their home. Now today we have everybody working out of their home, and they come to the office mainly for printing, because we haven't got to that tool yet, printing and scanning needs. So they schedule a day at the office to keep it down to a percentage level. But it's amazing how many people now want to come to the office because of the issues that related to COVID for them, the isolation, the non-peer support. That's key. You know, you can only be around your spouse so long in a day, I'm guessing. So at the end of the day, they need that support from their peers. And so now it's like, I got to come. I got to come. And we're trying to work through that just to manage the stress and to, you know, debrief of some client issues as well. Quickly to get into the transparency or the staff communications, we are a highly transparent organization, not only with our supporters, but with our staff. We try as hard as we can. You cannot communicate enough in content or often or time. So just the changes that we've had, we've always had our monthly staff meetings, and we've always had our internal communications through email, but we had to add, you know, Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all those tools that are available to us. Of course, we didn't know how to use them because we're not tech people. So we had to have a process to learn how to use that kind of stuff, how to communicate to clients using that type of equipment. And then, you know, it's hard for me to get a hold of a program director or some of the leadership because they're always on their phone with their staff. And so I commend the staff today. I know they're touching base with their staff to take some of that burden off, to try to put that light switch on and off. And just real quickly to say that we were just looking at cell phones, you know, providing a per diem or getting a phone. Overwhelmingly people said, I want a second phone because I can turn it off. And so just to know that they were willing to carry two devices just to be able to say, I'm going to turn one off. And so they get it. Ken doesn't quite get it, but they get it. And so it's been a learning, you know, even these last 2 or 3 months, and today, you know, the changes of the effects of COVID on the state today is making us react different. We are as nimble as we can be. You know, with the limits, we're learning more every day. You know, we try to reduce that risk. And so we have a saying that I put on for all the board members every time we have an agenda or a meeting. This is on the agenda, and it's excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. And so, you know, we are in the midst of change. We don't even use the word normal. We don't use the word new normal. What we use is adaptability and what can we do to serve our clients and continue to serve the community. So I'm going to end there, and hopefully if there's questions, we can answer those as well.
So I'll just jump in real quick with one question that we fielded. And since we have scholar and practitioner and scholar, the question, Dr. Kerr or Kent, is any research on the impact of working remotely on employee engagement and or organizational values? And then maybe Kent, you can provide some perspective as living in that world right now.
Yeah, and I'm going to answer it from a organizational standpoint, saying that research, well, we don't know what research says because we don't have time to look at the research. What we have anecdotally is initially it was a great idea. Everybody thought it was going to be great, clamoring for it. And now it's, how do I get back? I need support. So what does support look like? And EAP, is it calling, is it more than that? I think it's that human touch that they're so used to giving. They empty their tank every day. And so how do we refill the tank for them?
The research agrees with that, reflects that it is good going forward for those of us in the nonprofit area to understand that the effects of a situation like this are not likely to go away. I mean, we have research from 3 to 6 years out from the events, and we know that people are still experiencing symptoms of PTSD, high stress, and the responses to that are important from the organization standpoint. So that's a high-level summary of what the research says. It is not going to be over anytime soon for leaders and managers.
Maybe one other I can direct toward Kent is COVID presented a situation to nonprofit organizations, and kind of how you summarize the need to work together. Maybe comment on your thoughts on, might this lead to organizations more naturally or organically working together in the future, just based on what's happened with COVID?
I hope. The good news is, moving to Austin, you kind of think, well, everybody sits in their own, is competitive. That's not the case, at least in the social service and human service delivery model. Very open to working with each other. There's not a whole lot of overlap, even though a lot of organizations do case management, but we are the older adult case manager. So if there's anybody over 55, they're calling family elder care. If there's anybody under that, we call other people. And so I think what we has come to more important is more calls, more communication. It used to be when it was, again, a need or a crisis, and now it's daily and weekly. How are you doing? How are you handling this with your client base? Is there stuff to glean from or learn from? And so that's what's happening. It's started to happen now. And there's a lot of people stepping up to organize those, even within the city. Hey, I'm going to put you guys together. You didn't think about that group because that's not one of your normal go-tos. But there's so much similarities. And mainly, as Deborah said, is for that support. You got to have that.
That's great. Thanks.
A couple of comments are coming in in reference to sort of how to stay connected. So one example, somebody said that the Girl Scouts sent out sort of materials that was branded and sent it out to all their staff. Another individual mentioned the idea of sharing and communicating, commenting on your participation in this. Maybe thoughts about how, you guys are all talking about it, but how you stay connected with the different constituencies when you really can't be together.
Did the Girl Scouts send cookies too?
Yeah, really. Then we really would have been.
Yeah, then that would really capture my attention.
We send envelopes. Hopefully, somebody will help fund us. We are still engaging, like in the newsletter. It's not as often as enough because of just bandwidth. It really comes down to finding. I wish we were funded better for that type of awareness campaign and communication campaign. We do have a newsletter. It's changed a lot because of COVID, more into helping people understand, communicating not just more about family health care, but more how to protect yourself, how, you know, some of the things that they may not get from another source. Not every senior has Google, I can tell you that. They don't even have a device to get to Google. And so we have to communicate to them through a lot of mailings, a lot of, again, social distancing conversations. So you can imagine it's a little slower to get out.
Other questions people want to post online or pose to folks in reference to reflections? I was thinking a little bit about, Deborah, both of you actually touched on the idea of boundaries and whether you wanted to revisit that at all. Kent, you talked about the example of people asking for 2 phones. Seemed like that's a nice example, but you also gave the one of Sunday night we're getting emails, and so we're expected to respond by Monday morning at 7 a.m. and be ready to be able to respond. And so how do you balance that same need to be able to shut down, but to be able to stay connected? So some thoughts about the boundary issue is a bit tricky because I'm struggling with it myself, right? When do you shut off?
Yeah, I think it has to be a conscious decision, and it has to be intentional, Kent, right? I mean, you have to make a decision, then you have to act on that decision. So you have to have the strength to turn it off. One thing that helps is if you can schedule that, right? If you can tell people, here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be offline for whatever the boundaries are for being offline. Let people know. And then, especially for leaders and managers, you actually have to do it. You know, it's more than motivation, it's willpower. Because if you are, as the leader, taking a break, that encourages others to take a break. So it's modeling that mental health, self-care stuff that is so important, and that in our business culture, whether it's private sector, nonprofit, or public sector, that turning off can make people feel guilty, or some managers don't understand how humans work, which is interesting. But the fact that you need to have that time away to fuel your own creativity. So Kent, you got anything else there?
You know, we all say it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we say it overly. You know, I've scheduled time off. I've scheduled, I need to have this time from 3 to 5. But inherently, you're born with this. If you're in this work, mm-hmm. it's not do as I say. It's, you're doing it opposite, because mm-hmm. it's just, you're helping somebody that needs your help. And it's hard to say, hey, I'll get back to you, when you have the ability to do it right then. And that's where we get burnout mm-hmm. a lot. And we have to be very careful of it. So even as leaders, you go, well, our staff's doing it, then I have to do it. So it's kind of like repeating. It's a vicious cycle. And we talk about it to say, look, you got to take some time off. And then you see an email come through from one of those people, and you go, dadgummit. So,
because you're checking email, right, Kent? You're not supposed to
always,
be.
Of course, yeah, on Sunday night. So
let's get to Dr. Tasha Bruce has a question for you.
Yes. Hi, Deborah. This is Tasha.
Hi, Tasha.
Hi. My question came out of when someone mentioned the Girl Scout masks that were sent out, and I thought, well, that's what a great way to kind of enhance the culture of an organization, kind of from an egg or shine artifact, type of thing, or symbol that kind of would unite them and bind them together. But then I kind of was going back to something you mentioned. We haven't carried it through the whole conversation, but at the beginning of the conversation, you made a very great point about COVID is going on, but not just COVID, but a lot of civil unrest. And sometimes what I've been doing, just some casual interviewing through a consulting project that I'm working on. And there's been some disagreement on organizations coming out with policies, written policies, or, our belief is, or, some type of policy that addresses the civil unrest and where that actually fits, because there's some seems to be some disagreement on whether or not that remains an artifact and just a document and a symbol, or actually does it emesh further into assumptions in the organizational norms. And with your experience working with with different organizations, and since you brought up civil unrest, do you have an opinion on that?
I have some ideas.
Okay.
About that. It seems to me a bit premature to be issuing policies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that organizations have released statements of support. That's great. To get to the policy part, I think a whole lot more conversation and sharing and wrestling with hard issues needs to happen before it ends up in a policy. So that's one, that's an organizational thing. Second, the idea that the civil rights issues, the justice issues are not affecting our employees, that's crazy. The whole environment affects the employees. So the transparency has to be, again, led by the heads of the organizations and the management team. I think it's useful to say, we're in a spot, we need to figure out what our next steps will be, and have diverse voices coming into the conversation. So yeah, premature to make policy, because I don't think we know enough as organizations. There's a knowledge building that's very important. And secondly, in terms of employee health and well-being.
And I just asked because one of the consulting project I was asked to work on was in Illinois. And for the past 2 years, they've been having an association of police chiefs have been having town, what they call community cafes with the local NAACPs. And this has been going on for 2 years. And I'm in the process of doing qualitative analysis of all of this data. And there seems sometimes that there's a little bit of a distrust when, like you say, all of a sudden there's a new policy, or we've put out a statement because of Ferguson, or because, of Minneapolis, and that these are reactions and not responses. And definitely there's being the two different definitions there. So that distrust. So it kind of mirrors what I'm trying to remain unbiased, obviously, when I'm analyzing, just doing contextual analysis. But it certainly, you add a little bit of context and verify a little bit of what they're saying in the text, in the transcriptions.
Thanks, Tasha.
Yeah.
Maybe one quick question from a Bush School alum. Cody, you want to chime in real quick?
Oh, yes. My question was in reference...
Hello, Cody.
Hi, Dr. Kerr. My question was in reference to managing up, especially, primarily with the distancing that's happening with COVID-19, but also going into the racial tensions that have occurred in my organization. I was looked into our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and it has been very difficult for me to hold those boundaries. But at the same time, I personally feel obligated to be in those conversations because the organization has been so distanced from those potential policies. So we are currently writing an RFP and to have a consultant to assess our culture, offer suggestions, potentially implementation. But what, I guess, yeah, what would be kind of the steps or potentially additional conversations that would need to be had from someone who is both a new employee, but is definitely has a different perspective than the majority of the organization?
Okay, this is, I don't think there's any such thing as managing up. The reason that I came to that conclusion is that there's a power asymmetry that is, I mean, it's reflected in the job titles. I mean, your boss has power that you don't have, Cody. So I think that the approach is to, for you as an individual and rather new employee, is there a way to, within the organization, have conversations that enable, my guess is you might not be the only one who would like to talk about this. Are there ways to have conversations among peers and then with the peers and the managers? I'm not sure that your organization has the knowledge needed to do that organization-wide. So the step of doing some analysis is a good first step. It's not the only step. I don't think it's the only step that happens at the same time. You know, the issue of transparency, and if the organization is by its nature not transparent, then a newish employee is really not going to have the power to influence that very much. I'm so sorry, Cody.
That's all right. Thank you.
But I think that's comforting in some ways, right? I mean, I mean, the idea of being able to manage up is a little, perhaps, I mean, Cody, I don't mean to speak for you, but I mean, I find a little bit of comfort in that idea to recognize that there are limitations in reference to our capacity to really be able to influence those who supervise us and manage us. It's almost our accommodation of those within the constraint of being there, but trying to have conversations when you can. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
It is.
Yeah, and that's
go on ahead, Kenny, and then we'll wrap it up.
I was going to say that was a great response, Dr. Kerr. I mean, it's a typical communication strategy, Cody, that as you talk with your peers, and there's always other ambassadors at all levels of organizations, because typically, you know, without being sure the size of the organization.
Put them there, and they just stick to my finger and then don't come out. You're just like stupid.
With your, you know, with staff around your organization, especially when the staff is concentrated at lower levels in terms of having larger numbers at lower levels in your organization. And there's power that comes with that, as sure as you discuss with others and you have a collective voice, or can build a collective voice that management should be, especially in the nonprofit sector, open to listening to.
Yeah, should, Kenny.
Right.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you joining us this afternoon. We'll be back next week with Mary Hildebrand, who's going to talk about adaptive leadership. Should be another good session. So I appreciate everybody joining us this week. Deborah, Kent, really a pleasure. Talked on a lot of really good issues. And so
Oh, sure. Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kent.
Thank you.